AskReddit by Mango Chocolate. What's the quickest way you saw a coworker get fired? In my old law office, a firm-wide email was sent out announcing the arrival of a new employee. We will call him Paul. So Paul decided to reply all to let all of us know that he was aware of our recent legal defeats, that many people should be fired for these failures, and that his hiring was the first good thing our firm had done in years. The dude was a legal assistant right out of college with no experience. A minute after the email went out, I heard a crazy shout and then watched one of the senior partners run past my office towards HR. And 5 minutes later Paul walked past with the HR manager and a security escort. He lasted less than 45 minutes. Paul proved me right. The firm continues its downward trajectory. I was working at a Denny's. They hired a new manager. They were onboarding her for her first day. Then I never saw her again and nobody had even mentioned her. After a couple of days, I asked what happened to her. I figured she was working a different shift or she had possibly gotten COVID. Nope, they just caught her smoking crack on camera. Huh, isn't that a job requirement to manage Denny's? I worked at a lotteries company. A guy working in testing got access to production data and printed off some test tickets with some unclaimed winning numbers. He only did low amounts, like $500, and claimed 3 of them in 3 completely different locations around town. Of course the company was really interested in the story of someone who found a 6-month-old lottery ticket and claimed it, but they were even more interested to find it was the same person going to 3 locations. Needless to say, when they realized the guy actually worked in the company, he got pulled into a room with cops awaiting him. Not even smart enough to send several friends? Worked at a bank. We were robbed at gunpoint. One of the tellers was quick to tweet out, "Woo, get the rest of the day off. Feel free to visit me at work with a gun and ski mask anytime," fired upon walking in the next morning. Not a sacking, but I used to work at a bank and another branch had a failed attempt to be robbed by knife. One guy working there was telling everyone of his heroics with a knife in his face. Turns out the truth was he was in the staff room making coffee and didn't even realize it had happened. Idiot pressed the emergency stop for fun on his second day at work. The emergency stop that he hit switches off all drives on the 100 long paper machine. This means there is a loss of production for 3-4 hours for the entire paper mill. He was immediately escorted from the factory premises by 2 colleagues. Boss shows up. "Where's the new guy?" Other workers. "He fucked up so bad we fired him." I had a coworker get picked for a random drug test. She went back to her desk to grab her purse and just left the building. Never TJ return. Had something similar. I work in a production factory that uses a labor hire company for forklift drivers. This particular day we had a new bloke on. He was twitching and looked cracked out. He ended up spilling 3 beams of preforms on top of the forklift, driving dangerously. This was about 4 hours into his shift. Supervisor told him standard protocol with any type of incident was a drug and alcohol test. He said he was going to get some food while he waited. Instead he got on his push bike and was never seen again. The boss sat her down to talk about her recent behavior at work. She whipped out her phone and started taking a video, saying that it was her right to record for when it goes to court. The boss said, "Okay, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. You're fired." This was at a Domino's Pizza. Edit. Jesus Christ, I didn't think this story was that good. Thanks folks. LMAO. Evidently robbed a bank on their lunch break. Came back like nothing happened, then the cops showed up and took him down. It was crazy. Edit. Changed card to came. Hell of a side hustle they were trying to get going. Pulling into the parking lot on the first day. Ran into a light pole that took out electricity to the whole site. Wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was thrown into the front window. When we went out to see what had happened, she reeked of booze and there were empty liquor bottles in the back of the car. She never even made it to the front door, got a guest badge or started her orientation training. Honestly, you shouldn't fire anyone who brings that sort of efficiency to the table. She's like the army does more before 9 AM than most of us do all day. When I was in high school I used to do seasonal work at haunted houses, which I did for 4 years. A new guy that they hired was supposed to help with parking. Now, in the 3 years that I worked at this haunted house, they never once charged people for parking. It was a very dark parking lot off of a cliff, so had to make sure no one drove off of it trying to park. This cheeky son of a bitch started charging people $5 to park. It was only found out after someone complained because they didn't have the money to go in with their friends because they had to pay for parking. I think the guy was only there a couple of hours before he got fired. At one point a few of the super busy gas stations in my area would send attendants out to collect cash and send drivers on their way to speed pump turnover. That stopped after random dudes in greasy coveralls started showing up to collect cash. They got hired and then fell asleep during a meeting their first day and was asked not to come back. Same here. Tech company hired a new developer, and the owner caught him napping at a desk on day 1 when he was supposed to be reviewing training materials. Owner had a chat with him, told him whatever the reason, it was really bad form to fall asleep on the job on the first day. The new hire apologized, understood, and went back to the training materials. Not 20 minutes later, the owner walks by again and the guy is passed out once again, so he walked over, woke him up, and told him he was fired and to get out. I don't even think he made it to his 4th hour of employment. Early in my career I was an engineer on a refinery in the UK, and I was in charge of the QC lab. But all we had to have external independent testing on the refinery fuel products to confirm they complied with government regulations. It seemed getting a job for the testing company was that you had to be an adult and had a driving license. The lab had a lot of very nasty chemicals either being tested or used in the testing or cleaning of the oil products. A new young girl turned up for the testing company and was dipping her finger into a chemical called phenol and stating that it makes your hand and arm go numb. Phenol is a severe muscle relaxant, including your heart, and can kill you at very low concentrations. 1 hour into her employment we had paramedics on scene monitoring her vitals and was released after 8 hours. She didn't last the first hour of the first day and the testing company was fined pretty heavily. What the hell? I worked in an organic chemistry lab a long time ago and the basic attitude was constant mild to mid-level paranoia. Like, wash your hands before going to take a piss level paranoia. A guy got hired in the first firm I ever worked for, turns up for first morning at work, and within an hour has emailed the entire company, 6,000 people, about his band and their availability for birthdays, weddings, etc. He was dismissed by lunchtime. Edit, answering the questions in the replies about how anyone junior could have access to the all users address. This was back in about 94, shortly after email. It was called Mismail. I think I assume the precursor to Outlook was rolled out within the company. I remember not having a work email address when I joined. I don't think the IT department had yet got up to speed on what could go wrong letting everyone have access to everything. So he got paid half a day's wage to advertise his band to 6k people? Man's a freaking genius. I was working at a place that made food items. You could have as many of these as you liked while at work but can only take one home with you. A guy gets hired and takes advantage of this and consumes a bucket load of these items at work, which is fine, that's the deal. He then goes to leave for the day and security asks to check his bag. He hesitates and asks security if they could just check it tomorrow instead. They say no, and he says I do have some items in there, I haven't left the site yet, can I put them in your fridge? Security relents and lets him do this. Security then checks the fridge and there's 18 items in there that weren't before. The guy's immediately terminated. Lost his job over $8 worth of products. They are donuts, aren't they? One day Tim announced that he wasn't paid enough and was going to basically sit at his desk doing nothing until he was paid what he wanted. 20 minutes later the boss walked in and asked him if he could have a word with him. 5 minutes later the boss walked back in and announced that Tim no longer worked there and if there were any questions. There were no questions. He missed the quiet part of quiet quitting. A server I worked with was adding in her credit card tips and adding a quarter to every tip to charge on the card. A couple people every now and then would notice on their bank statement and it got to a point where management vetted her receipts one night and the tips she would enter in and send her packing a sap. My BFF has a barista add $3 to his card as a tip and she got fired for it. Wonder how long she's been getting away with it. I'm sure it adds up. Interviewed a guy that was replacing someone who was leaving. Offered the job and was supposed to start the next day. Just so happened that we were having a going away party for the leaving dude that night, so new guy was invited as a chance to get to know the team. New guy shows up and proceeds to get absolutely shit-faced and asked the head of HR if she wanted to go back to his place because he got a vibe during the interview process. Next day, new guy is a no-show, so we were thinking bullet dodged. He shows up just before lunch, clearly hungover, making up some excuse for being late. Big boss came out and told the guy to gfo. Had a boss who, before every work event with alcohol, would tell people, enjoy yourself, but don't be that guy. There's always that guy. Was training this teenage guy, who on his first day came super high. On his first customers he said to the lady he was helping, "Man, these are some huge knockers you're carrying." Yeah, he was fired immediately. A friend of mine started his first day really high so that his bosses wouldn't expect too much from him in the future. His job was fueling jets on an aircraft carrier. I fired someone who decided her second day that she was going to go out to lunch and not come back. The next morning she told everyone all about the shopping she did. She seemed confused about the expectations. I worked as a temp during summer holidays some years back, and there were a few more of us doing a week here or there during summer. One of them started on a Tuesday. The next day he was nowhere to be found after lunch. About 2 hours later he shows up ready for action. Turns out, the grocery store across the street didn't have the right ham out on his sandwich, so he took a bus into the city center and found the right ham there. He was pretty upset when he got told to go home and that he would only get paid for the first 3 hours of the day. He couldn't fathom how it was his fault that the closest grocery didn't have what he needed. Co-worker got promoted to team lead. He poached an employee from my team. Once the employee was reporting to him, he starts threatening the employee's immigration work visa status. Employee goes right to HR. He is Indian, but he's not on a visa. He's a citizen. Dude went from promoted due to excellent performance to fired for being a racist fuck in about 2 days. What a fucking moron. Why bother poaching a guy only to threaten him? Makes no sense to me why people think someone would work harder and do a better job when they actively hate you. My newly hired co-worker was on her second week of training. Got caught by a supervisor going to town with a vibrator in her cubicle. Like, pants unzipped, muffled moans, etc. I'm 90% sure she just got hired there to check something on her fetish bucket list. Maybe she was making content. I work in a strip club, so turnover is extremely high, but the owner of our club met this girl who needed a job place to live. He set her up with a job at the club, and since we are in partnership with a certain hotel, he had her deposit comped and paid for a few nights for her in the room. 6 hours later he gets a call that the hotel is calling the police and reporting his club as well. She goes into the hotel room, smokes it out, and then invites 5 dudes who come over and tear up the room. They were all extremely loud, so people complained, which led to the owner being contacted. The room was so smoked out it was leaking under the hotel door. Within 6 hours she was back to having no job and being homeless once again. It was a hell of a 6 hours for her though. Hired a dude. He started early because we had an on-site team meeting in Florida. This was in the 2015 time frame. During the meeting he made a ton of anti-Semitic jokes and statements. We have multiple Jewish co-workers in the meeting. Middle of the meeting when boss was ready to throw him out anyway, she got a call from HR. His background check was delayed by 2 weeks because the name he gave wasn't his official name. He had multiple felonies. Escorted off the property. Yikes. I used to work for a company that made a product mostly used by women, and about half was sold in China. Had a guest trainer come in and start making sexist and racist jokes about Asian people. He was quickly yeeted out of the building, and someone else had to cover the rest of the training. When I was in college there was a pizza guy that would sell weed when he delivered pizzas. People would ask for Freddy to deliver the pizza. This was about 1989 to 1990, so he wouldn't have had even his own pager then. I don't know what happened, but it didn't last long. The owner of the pizza store I worked at actually had his own hydroponic grow in a massive shed on his farm out west. Used the pizza place as a front to move it with a few trusted drivers. There was special non-menu items that would trigger a delivery to go to these drivers. It was a franchise, and word eventually got out. He was paid out and someone else took over the business. No police action or anything. Was in the 90s. One of the drivers got knocked off for cash. Word was he was carry about $15K at the time. At my first job, the dishwasher walked out into the dinner parlor and announced to all customers that a contagious disease has been making its way through the kitchen. Owner was in the building, dragged the guy out the front door by the wrist, and apologized to customers. This was 2008. Edit, left out the crucial tidbit that it was fabricated. Nobody was sick at all. We have a set of movable stairs like they have in supermarkets. Goes about 2.5 m in the air. Old mate decided to vigorously shake and move it while another co-worker was on it as a joke. He went on suspension immediately and stayed there until he was officially fired and the 2 weeks notice ran out. Another employee had already given in his 2 weeks notice and was about a week into it. He made a comment to another employee that he couldn't wait to go. Boss overheard and decided that he didn't need to do the remaining week of notice, they would just pay him out instead. Someone finally lost their shit at the photocopier. It was fairly new but regularly caused issues. Lost jobs, printed on the wrong paper etc. They unplugged it at the wall, opened the door to the fire stairs, and pushed the photocopier down the stairs. The noise and the mess, colored toner spread over 5 floors worth of stairs, caught everyone's attention. They were escorted out by security immediately. It's always the quiet ones you have to watch out for. Nobody expected it from her. Had a printer that worked like garbage in the ER once. One of the older docs calmly walks over to it and unplugs it. He proceeds to calmly carry it down to the unit manager's office and drop it on the floor in front of her desk and say printer's broke and walk away. A co-worker thought it was a good idea to mix Benzos and booze and come to work like that. He was caught with a can of beer on his desk. This was last Monday actually. At least have the common decency to put it in a coffee cup. New line cook thought it'd be funny walk around like Edward Scissorhands with all the knives. He was around the corner right as a server was coming through, and she almost got. New line cook just chuckled and waved his knife hands around more until the GM strode right up behind him, grabbed him by the collar, and marched him right out the back door. All this happened in under 5 minutes. I worked at a bar in college and a new door guy got fired for smoking a joint while on the job. He was actually shocked that he got fired. It was both crazy and hilarious. Even my boss who fired him found it hilarious afterwards. Another time a different door guy got fired for taking bribes to let underage kids inside. My boss this time was very angry and almost beat his ass. He got caught jerking off into the milk carton in the lunchroom fridge. Did he stand at the fridge or take the milk carton elsewhere? Either way, fucking what? Worked at bank as a teller. One of the personal bankers, 35-ish, went on a week-long vacation. Monday rolls around, she isn't back. Tuesday, no show. Wednesday she rolls in like nothing happened and was immediately escorted out. Apparently the company had a 48 hours no call no show policy. What I never understood was why she didn't just lie and call it sick or something. We had generous PTO sick leave. Worked in a warehouse for a few years, and there was this guy on the other shift that apparently had a habit of just disappearing. He wouldn't leave the facility, his badge never scanned the exit door and his car was always in the lot. If a manager called his cell phone trying to track him down, he would answer and show up out of nowhere. But he would notoriously disappear for hours at a time. Until one day, the supervisor is walking through a back corner of the warehouse, and he hears what sounded suspiciously like snoring. He looks around and ends up finding the guy, who had built a secret nap spot up high in the stacks by cleverly arranging the pallets. Would sneak up there to nap all the time. His snoring gave him away. He was fired on the spot. I was working in a spa. The guy working the front desk had about 20 minutes left in his shift. He went downstairs, smoked a blunt in his friend's car, came back up and got back behind the reception desk, blazed out of his mind. He was generally baked every single day, but this time he wasn't even functional. Fired on the spot. At another job, I was working at a call center to help people with their food stamps. I guess this one guy got into an argument with a caller, so he texted her from his personal phone. Broke bitches work at McDonald's. I found out because I was the person that answered the phone when she called back. I googled his phone number and I found his business on Facebook. As a teenager, I worked at a bowling alley. Within an hour, a new employee was fired because she dropped a ball on a complaining patron's foot. Unclear if dropping the ball was the cause of the complaining or her response to it. Deleted. I remember my training for a camp counselor basically felt just like 3 hours of don't touch the kids. Don't touch the kids. Do not think about touching the kids. Do not think about thinking about touching the kids. A server and regional manager are standing at the pickup window. RM, run those plates that just came up. Server, those aren't my plates, not my job. RM, you don't have a job. Get your stuff and go. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize you didn't mean running license plates. I almost got fired from a job working Rent-A-Center. My RM moved me to a new store. First 5 minutes there, with manager and RM standing over me. Lady comes in to pay her bill. Has a shitload of ones. I make the comment. Wow, that is a giant wad of ones, and laughed. She laughed. Manager laughed. RM laughed. As the lady leaves, manager says to me, "Yeah, that was disrespectful. You are fired." RM blocked it and moved me to a new store in a much better part of town. Since it was a nicer area, we got much lower business. So I skated by till they shuttered the store. How is that even disrespectful? I don't get it. You didn't call her a stripper. Threatened to bring in a gun after a disagreement. Guy at my job went on vacation the Friday before Thanksgiving and the whole week of Thanksgiving, only he wasn't approved. The boss literally told him, "If you don't come in tomorrow, you'll be fired because your vacation was never approved." Guy didn't show up Friday. He walked into the office today like nothing happened and was told to hand over his keys and company phone and to get off the property immediately. He didn't understand why he was fired. A line cook at a restaurant I know did that. Except he wasn't fired, he came back and dared them to fire him. Beyond that, he was hardworking and reliable, and they were already short-staffed. When I was a teen, I worked at a restaurant as a hostess, and they hired this guy who was 20 to work with me as another host. Anyways, first day he comes in, works his 1-hour training shift, and asks the manager to use his cell phone so he can call his mom to get him. This was around 2004, so cell phones weren't as common as now. Manager thinks nothing of it and gives him his phone. He then just walked out immediately and left with his phone. Manager had to call his mom and she brought it back a few hours later saying he has a bad habit of forgetting things and not to fire him, and he got fired anyways. Today, dude was observed vaping while fueling an aircraft. Unemployed 1 hour later. We had a fueler not only get fired, but arrested a couple of weeks ago. He was texting and driving a fuel truck and killed a man. He grabbed one of our female co-workers' butt, who was a minor as well, and asked our GM, is this sexual harassment? Pretty sure he was on drugs, and he was in his mid-50s. Fired immediately. I used to work as a mason. After an earthquake we had a ton of work rebuilding block walls. On a Friday we had a guy stop by the job site looking for a job. We told him be here tomorrow morning at 8 AM. We were so busy weekends were a thing often. He shows up the next morning super hungover from celebrating the night before. He asked several times for aspirin but we didn't have any. He then wanted to go get some. We said just chill, it will be lunch soon and you can go grab some. Shortly after that he went to his truck for something and disappeared, never to be seen again. Our health and safety guy was lying about the safety of a work site. He was telling our client that the contaminants in soil, most notably arsenic and mercury from an old oil refinery, were at a safe exposure level. They were not. Multiple people at the 4 different companies at this site had documented issues with pissing blood, high levels of heavy metals in blood, and chronic headaches. I had chronic headaches at this site too. Our sniffers on the site were working overtime. We had to wear Tyvek pants when digging, and I definitely have some lingering issues with headaches from where contaminated soil got into my eyes and mouth. This was 2 months ago. He was fired with no notice and no mention in the weekly scheduling emails sent out every week that usually include welcomes, farewells to new hires and departing employees. The day prior he was sending out happy reminders about hydration in the work chat, and then poof, his company email and everything disappeared. Dude showed up in his boxers and t-shirt hungover as fuck on his first day. Said he lost his pants and needed some for work. 4th degree criminal sexual misconduct. Dude was a mental health therapist who was having multiple sexual relationships with his clients. The second the first allegations came to light, HR axed him. Then word for around and more clients came forward. It was wild afterwards because the state had to do an investigation and there were failed threats made against me for telling people in our field what happened to Brad. But the allegations are founded, and he was arrested the day the state pulled his license. All this is in the public record BTW. Was this in Pasadena? Working at Domino's and one of the late night drivers brought their PS4 in and started playing Mortal Kombat on the security camera monitor. Dropped an N-bomb and thought being Asian was gonna save him. He, a department lead, compared working for the company to slavery. In the morning all hands and store manager meeting.